An HOA security guard thought he was in charge, until the woman he pulled a gun on showed him just how wrong he was. Imagine pulling into your own driveway on a bright Saturday afternoon, feeling that small relief of finally being home after running errands. That's exactly what happened to Danielle Rhodes in Plano, Texas. 38 years old, sharp-minded, and organized, she was the kind of woman who liked to have her Saturdays planned down to the last stop. Target, the dry cleaner, then the local farmer's market for fresh vegetables. By the time she turned onto her street, her trunk was loaded with grocery bags, and she was thinking about nothing more than getting the food inside before the Texas heat spoiled it. But Danielle's quiet return home was about to turn into a scene she never imagined could happen in her own neighborhood. She parked her gray SUV neatly in her driveway, popped the trunk, and began pulling out bags, balancing 2 in each hand. Across the street, a man she didn't recognize stood under the shade of a tree, arms crossed, a neon yellow security vest stretched over his belly. His eyes locked onto her every move, not blinking, not breaking contact. Danielle noticed him instantly, but like anyone would, she thought, maybe he's just waiting for someone. Maybe he's just on his phone. But he wasn't on his phone. He wasn't waiting for anyone. His entire attention was on her. Danielle shifted the bags in her hand, pressed the trunk closed with her elbow, and began walking up her front path. That's when she heard footsteps, firm, deliberate, moving quickly toward her. "Excuse me," the man barked out. Danielle turned, her keys in one hand, groceries in the other. "Yes?" she asked, calm but slightly puzzled. The man adjusted his vest and strode closer. He looked mid-40s, a little sunburned, with a trimmed mustache and mirrored sunglasses that hid his eyes. "This is a private neighborhood," he said, his tone sharp and rehearsed, like he had practiced it in the mirror. "I'm with the HOA security detail. I need to see some identification to confirm you actually live here." Danielle blinked. For a moment, she wondered if it was some sort of bad joke, but his posture, his clipped voice, and the way his hand rested on his hip made it clear. This man was dead serious. "Excuse me?" Danielle repeated, this time with an edge in her voice. "I don't need to show you anything. This is my house." The man stepped closer, lowering his voice but making it even more threatening. "Ma'am, I don't want to cause a problem here, but you need to prove you belong. People have been walking around this neighborhood who don't live here, and I'm not going to let that happen on my watch." Danielle set her grocery bags down on the porch, straightened up, and stared at him. "First of all," she said, keeping her voice level, "you don't have the authority to demand anything from me. Second, I've lived here for 3 years. And third, you're standing on my property. You need to leave." For a split second, the air between them went still. The sound of kids laughing 2 houses down, the steady hum of a lawnmower across the street. It all felt strangely loud against the tension building in Danielle's driveway. The man smirked and shook his head slowly, as if she had just confirmed his suspicion. "You can make this easy, or you can make it hard," he muttered. And with that, the quiet Saturday afternoon Danielle had looked forward to so much took a dangerous turn. But what Danielle didn't realize yet was that this confrontation was about to escalate in front of the entire neighborhood, and every decision she made in the next few moments would matter more than she could have imagined. Danielle stood tall on her front steps, grocery bags resting at her feet, the sun catching on the silver keys still clutched in her hand. She wasn't intimidated easily, but something about this man's stance screamed that he wasn't going to walk away without a fight, verbal or otherwise. She took a deep breath, tilting her head slightly, as though she were giving him one last chance to back down. "Sir, I'm going to say this one more time. You are on my property. I don't owe you an ID, and I don't owe you an explanation. You need to move along." The man adjusted his belt and leaned closer, closing the gap between them. His badge, a cheap laminated card dangling from a lanyard, swung forward and back. The words "neighborhood security" were typed in bold, but Danielle knew instantly it wasn't tied to any real law enforcement authority. "You think I don't know what's going on?" he shot back. "We've had complaints. People who don't belong here. People casing houses in broad daylight. You think I'm just going to let anyone walk around like they own the place?" Danielle crossed her arms. "Anyone? Or just me?" The man hesitated, his jaw tightening for a fraction of a second, but he quickly masked it with a laugh that carried no warmth. "Don't start with me," he said, pointing a finger toward her door. "You want this to be simple? Just show me a driver's license with this address on it. If you live here like you say, no harm done. I'll be on my way." Danielle felt the weight of his words pressing against her, but she refused to budge. "I don't answer to you. I don't answer to the HOA's security team. You're not police. You're not even real security. You're a neighbor with a vest." From the corner of her eye, Danielle noticed curtains shift across the street. A woman in a floral blouse was peeking out from behind her blinds, watching closely. Further down, a teenager had paused his basketball dribbling, holding the ball against his hip as he squinted at the scene. People were starting to pay attention. The man noticed too. His shoulders stiffened and his voice lowered to a growl. "You think people don't notice things? I see you coming and going. I see your car. Doesn't quite fit around here, does it?" Danielle's pulse quickened. She had dealt with enough coded language in her life to know what he was really saying. She locked eyes with him, steady, calm, but there was steel in her tone when she replied, "My car fits just fine. My house fits just fine. And whether you like it or not, I fit just fine." For a moment, he was silent, chewing on her words, visibly struggling to regain control of the situation. His hand brushed against his hip again, hovering near something clipped to his waistband under the edge of his vest. Danielle caught the motion immediately, cataloging it in her mind like she had been trained to do countless times before. "Sir," she said firmly, "if you're about to do what I think you're about to do, I need you to think long and hard about the consequences. You're standing here, in broad daylight, threatening someone at their own home. Neighbors are watching. You're already in the wrong. Don't make it worse." The man tilted his head, lips curling into something between a sneer and a smirk. "You talk a lot of big words for someone about to get herself in trouble." Danielle didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply leaned forward just enough so he could hear every syllable. "You're the one in trouble." The standoff stretched, the kind that makes seconds feel like entire minutes. Across the street, the woman at the window whispered into a phone, pressing it tightly to her ear. The teenager dropped his basketball and backed toward his garage. Danielle saw it all. She also saw the man's right hand twitch, sliding slowly toward his vest pocket. Her muscles tightened in response, her training kicking in almost reflexively. She had to make a choice, escalate or hold the line. And then, just like that, he moved. His hand snapped down, gripping the shape of a pistol holstered on his side. He didn't point it yet, but the message was clear. He was done talking. But Danielle wasn't like anyone he had ever confronted before, and the next move she made would decide whether this confrontation turned deadly or not. The glint of the pistol's barrel caught the sun as he pulled it free from the holster. Gasps echoed from across the street. Danielle didn't move an inch. Her training screamed at her, "Stay calm, control your breathing, assess every angle." Panic was the man's weapon now, and he wanted her to flinch. She refused to give him that. "Put the gun away," Danielle said, her voice steady but low, carrying just enough weight to slice through the hot summer air. The man lifted his chin, emboldened by the weapon in his hand. "I asked nicely. I asked for ID. You could have avoided this. But you want to act tough? Fine. We'll see who's tougher." From the corner of her eye, Danielle could see neighbors frozen in place. A boy had stopped riding his bike mid-street, his front wheel wobbling as he stared at the gun in shock. A man watering his lawn just 2 houses down shut off the hose and slowly backed toward his porch. Danielle's heart ached at that detail. Innocent people were watching this play out. Any sudden move, and someone could be hurt. "You're pointing a gun at a homeowner in broad daylight," Danielle said, her words calm but edged with authority. "You think that makes you the hero here? You're one bad decision away from ending up in a courtroom, or worse." He stepped closer, the gun still raised, but wavering slightly in his grip. His voice cracked as he tried to keep his tone commanding. "Don't talk to me like that. I'm doing my job. This neighborhood has rules, and I'm not letting anyone break them." Danielle shook her head slowly. "Your job? You have no job here. The HOA doesn't hand out weapons. You're not law enforcement. You're a man with a vest and a gun, and right now you're breaking the law. Every single person out here is witnessing it." The woman in the floral blouse pressed closer to her window, phone still at her ear, whispering faster now. Another neighbor stepped onto her porch, arms crossed tight, staring at the standoff, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Danielle shifted her weight slightly, careful not to appear aggressive. Every small move counted. You need to put that gun down right now because once officers arrive and they're on their way, you'll have a whole lot more to answer for than whether or not I showed you an ID. Her voice cut through him. He blinked, his grip faltering for a split second. Danielle saw it, the hesitation, the doubt, and she pressed harder. You're nervous. Your hand is shaking. Do you even know what you'd do if that gun went off? Do you even realize how fast your life would change? How fast someone else's would end? His face flushed red, sweat dripping down his temple. He clenched his teeth, lifting the gun just a little higher, pointing it squarely at Danielle's chest. Don't test me, he said, the words breaking, more desperate than commanding now. Danielle didn't break eye contact. You're already being tested, and you're failing. The silence stretched again, the kind that made every sound, every bird call, every creak of a lawn chair, feel deafening. Danielle knew she had seconds, maybe less, to keep control before fear swallowed him whole and his fingers slipped. A voice cracked through the tension. The teenager with the basketball had edged closer to his driveway, yelling toward the man, "Hey, put it down, man! You're gonna get arrested!" The man whipped his head around, glaring at the boy, gun still raised. "Mind your business," he barked. Danielle seized the opening, her tone sharpened, commanding now, not a suggestion, but an order. Eyes back on me. Don't point that weapon anywhere else. You want to talk about rules? You're breaking the biggest one right now. You're endangering lives. That's not security. That's reckless. For a brief, dangerous moment, the gun trembled in his hands, the weight of it pulling against his nerves. Danielle could see the war inside him, the pride that had dragged him this far, and the fear of what would happen if he lowered it. She took a careful step forward, her voice dropping into a razor's edge. You're out of control. Put it down. The man's lips parted, a curse on his tongue, but his grip faltered again. His hand shook harder now, his chest rising and falling in ragged breaths. But just as the balance seemed to tip, the sound of distant sirens began to echo through the neighborhood, and Danielle knew everything was about to shift in ways neither of them could predict. The faint sirens in the distance sent a ripple through the neighborhood, heads turned, curtains shifted, and for the first time since pulling that gun, the man's bravado cracked. His arm stiffened, but the barrel wavered just slightly, like he wasn't sure if holding on or letting go would save him. Danielle locked onto that hesitation. Hear that? She said softly, her eyes never leaving his. They're coming. And when they get here, they won't care about your vest or your excuses. They'll see a man waving a gun at a homeowner. That's the picture you've painted for yourself. He swallowed hard, lips pressed tight. The neighbors were fully out now, two women clutching their kids by the arms, ushering them toward doorways. A man across the street had his phone raised, filming the entire thing. Every second, the walls were closing in on him, and Danielle made sure he felt it. You've still got a choice, she continued, calm but cutting. Put it down, walk away, and maybe you explain yourself later, or you keep pointing that gun, and when those sirens get closer, you're the one in handcuffs. That's how this ends. The man's jaw flexed. His pride was eating him alive, fighting with the reality Danielle was painting. He shifted his weight, sneering, trying to hold on to the scraps of authority he thought he had. You think you can talk to me like that? He spat. You think you're smarter than me? Danielle didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She let the silence hang for a moment, then leaned just slightly forward. No, I don't think I'm smarter than you. I know I'm calmer than you, and I know I'm not the one trembling with a gun in my hand in front of a crowd about to ruin my life. The words hit him. He barked out a laugh, but it was thin, shaky. His grip faltered, his hand jerking as the gun wobbled. Gasps rang out from the neighbors. Danielle's focus sharpened. This was the most dangerous moment, the point where a single twitch could turn into tragedy. Her voice dropped low, firm. Steady your hand. Put the weapon down gently, right now. The man's breathing grew ragged. He looked down at the gun, then back at Danielle, eyes hidden behind his mirrored lenses. He tried to cover the fear with a growl. You don't tell me what to do. Danielle's voice turned like steel. Yes, I do. Because if you fire that gun, even by accident, you'll never see daylight outside of a cell again. You'll be the man who pulled a trigger on a neighbor in front of children. You think anyone's going to defend you after that? He froze, his knuckles white against the grip. The sound of the sirens was louder now, rolling closer, turning into the neighborhood streets. The teenager who had shouted earlier edged a little closer to his garage, yelling again, "They're almost here! Just drop it, man! Drop it before they see you!" The man whipped his head in that direction, shouting, "Shut up!" But Danielle's voice sliced through his distraction instantly. "Eyes back on me. Don't you dare point that anywhere else," she commanded, sharp and commanding enough that even the neighbors stiffened. His arm swung back toward her, shaky but aimed again. Danielle inhaled, preparing herself. She had been in standoffs before, but never one where she was supposed to be the civilian. She had to stay that way. Her badge, her training, her authority, none of it could be revealed yet. The second she exposed herself as FBI, everything changed. And right now, her priority was making sure no one got hurt. "You've gone too far," she said, softer now but steady. "The only way out is down. Set the gun on the ground. Walk back. Do it slow." His lips trembled, his fingers twitched, and for a brief moment, it looked like he might actually listen. The pistol dipped, just a fraction, and Danielle's chest loosened by the smallest margin. But before that fragile moment could settle, the roar of squad cars echoed onto the street, tires crunching against asphalt, and the flashing lights painted the neighborhood red and blue. The sound of squad cars grew louder, closer, filling the cul-de-sac with a pulse of urgency. Neighbors who had been hiding behind curtains stepped fully onto porches, their phones held high, some recording, others dialing. What had begun as a private standoff in Danielle's driveway had now become a neighborhood spectacle. Everyone was a witness. Everyone had a stake. The man's gun still trembled in his grip, his chest heaving as if each breath carried the weight of his pride collapsing around him. Danielle's voice cut through the noise again, steady and commanding. "They're here. You've got seconds to decide how this ends. The whole block is watching." Across the street, the woman in the floral blouse opened her front door as just enough to step out, her phone still glued to her ear. "He's got a gun pointed at her right now. Yes, right now," she shouted to the dispatcher. "She keeps telling him to put it down. Please, hurry." Her words, carried through the thick summer air, only added pressure. The man snapped his head toward her, his arm twitching dangerously. "Don't you say another word," he barked. The crowd gasped in unison, some ducking instinctively as if the gun might swing in their direction. Danielle raised her voice instantly, slicing through his rage like a blade. "Eyes on me! Don't you turn that weapon on anyone else!" Her tone was sharp enough to snap his head back toward her. For a split second, she held his full attention again. She knew that saving lives sometimes meant controlling not just actions, but focus. The teenager with the basketball, now crouched by his garage, cupped his hands to his mouth and yelled, "Cops are pulling in! They're right there!" And sure enough, the wail of sirens gave way to the rumble of engines as two patrol cars turned onto the street, lights flashing. Neighbors scattered to the edges of their yards, some retreating inside, others holding their ground with phones pointed at the scene. Danielle could see it in the man's posture, the panic, the realization that this was no longer between just him and her. This was now public, official, documented from every angle. His ego wrestled with his fear, his hand twitching as though the weight of the gun was suddenly too much to bear. "You're not walking away from this unnoticed," Danielle told him. Her tone was quieter now, measured, but it carried just as much authority. "Every single person out here knows what you've done. Every camera has you on tape. The question is, do you want them to remember you as the man who made a mistake, or the man who pulled the trigger?" Her words landed heavy. He glanced at the crowd, the phones, the children clutching their parents. His grip faltered again. "You don't get it," he muttered, voice cracking. "They don't belong here. People need to follow rules. I'm just trying to keep this place safe." Danielle's chest tightened at the warped conviction in his voice. She had heard variations of that reasoning too many times in her career. Always the same justification for control, always the same dangerous pride. "You want to keep people safe?" she asked firmly. "Then stop being the danger. Right now, you're the only threat on this street. That gun isn't protecting anyone, it's scaring everyone." The neighbors murmured, some nodding, some whispering loudly enough for him to hear. "She's right. He's lost it." That's not protection. The pressure built around him like a cage, closing in from every direction. He shifted on his feet, the sweat soaking through his vest now visible, his knuckles pale as bone against the grip of the weapon. And then the first squad car rolled to a stop, doors flinging open. 2 officers stepped out, their voices carrying through the hot air. "Drop the weapon! Drop it now!" The neighborhood seemed to hold its breath all at once. The only sound was the echo of that command, bouncing off the stucco walls and trimmed lawns. Danielle didn't move, her voice still directed at him, lower than the officers but firm enough to cut through his panic. "You're done. Don't make this worse for yourself. Set it down." His arm shook violently now, the weight of choice pressing harder than the weapon itself. But the arrival of the officers didn't guarantee safety, because one wrong move, one flinch, and this street could still become the scene of tragedy. The flashing lights strobed across the manicured lawns, bouncing off parked cars, painting Danielle's brick home in red and blue. 2 officers, one male, one female, advanced slowly, their hands firm on their holsters. Their voices were sharp, practiced. "Drop the weapon! Hands where we can see them!" The man's whole body trembled now, the pistol shaking like a loose branch in a storm. He glanced between Danielle, the officers, and the crowd of neighbors staring at him with wide eyes and raised phones. The walls of his control were crumbling, and everyone knew it. Danielle didn't flinch. Her voice cut beneath the commands, softer but still commanding. "Listen to them. Put it down. Don't give them a reason to fire. You're boxed in. There's no way out if you keep holding that gun." The male officer moved slightly left, angling for a clearer line. The female officer matched his steps, balanced, calm, but ready. Their presence added weight, but also risk. One wrong twitch, one panic move, and the outcome could spiral beyond Danielle's reach. "Sir, this is your last warning," the female officer called out. "Drop the weapon." The man's breathing grew ragged. He barked back, voice breaking under strain. "I was just doing my job. I was protecting the neighborhood." The officer's reply was cold, blunt. "Pointing a gun at a homeowner is not your job. Drop it. Now." The gun dipped slightly, his arm weary under the strain. Danielle seized the moment, stepping forward just enough to draw his eyes back to her. "Look at me," she said, low and direct. "If you want to walk away from this alive, you need to put that weapon down, right now, slowly. No sudden moves." He swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his jaw, his free hand twitching as if he was debating whether to comply or fight. His pride still screamed for him to resist. His ego still wanted control, but his body was giving out. The neighbors murmured louder now, voices rising like a tide. "Put it down! Listen to her. Don't make it worse." The man's head jerked toward them, his gun wobbling dangerously again. Both officers tensed, their voices booming in unison. "Drop it now!" Danielle's voice cut in sharper than ever, an edge of authority no one else on that street could match. "You don't point that weapon anywhere else. Do you hear me? Put it on the ground." The gun trembled. Then finally, the man crouched, lowering it toward the asphalt. It clattered against the concrete with a hollow, metallic thud that seemed to echo across the entire street. Gasps burst from the neighbors. A few clapped their hands to their mouths. The teenager by the garage muttered, "Oh my God, he actually did it." The officers moved fast, closing the distance, ordering him to his knees. "Hands behind your head. Interlace your fingers." He complied, reluctantly, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. They cuffed him quickly, lifting him onto his feet, walking him toward the patrol car as his vest shifted awkwardly against his chest. His sunglasses slipped slightly, revealing darting, fearful eyes. The crowd erupted in whispers. Phones zoomed in. Children asked questions their parents didn't know how to answer. And Danielle? She finally let out a slow breath, her shoulders easing for the first time since the groceries hit the porch. The female officer turned to her, voice professional but measured. "Ma'am, are you okay? Did he threaten you before he drew the weapon?" Danielle glanced at the crowd, the phone still rolling, the neighborhood hanging on every detail. Her words had to be careful. For now, she stayed measured. "He confronted me, demanded ID, then escalated. I tried to keep him calm until you arrived." The officer nodded, but her eyes narrowed just slightly, studying Danielle's composure. There was something different about her calm, something beyond an average homeowner. "Most people would have been panicked," the officer remarked. You held it together." Danielle gave a small smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Let's just say I've had some experience. It was the closest she'd come to revealing who she really was. And though no one around her knew it yet, that small truth would soon come out. Because while the man was being placed into the back of the squad car, still shouting about doing his job and keeping the neighborhood safe, one of the neighbors, phone still recording, walked over and muttered to another, "She handled that like a cop." And that quiet observation was the spark that would soon pull Danielle's real identity into the light, changing how the neighborhood saw her forever. The man sat cuffed in the back of the patrol car, red-faced and shouting through the open window, as if his words might still carry weight. "I was protecting this neighborhood. You'll see, I was right." His voice cracked, desperation replacing the bravado that had fueled him only minutes before. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering, replaying the scene on their phones, shaking their heads in disbelief. The street that had been still only an hour ago was now buzzing with the weight of what everyone had just witnessed. Children tugged on their parents' sleeves, asking questions too heavy for their age. Parents answered with sighs, hugs, and silence. Danielle, meanwhile, stood on her porch, groceries still sweating in their bags beside her. Her chest rose and fell slowly, each breath an attempt to drain away the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She didn't show it, but inside she was exhausted. Encounters like this weren't new to her, but they were never supposed to happen here, in her own neighborhood, where she paid taxes, where she walked her dog, where she waved at neighbors while checking her mail. The female officer approached her, notebook in hand. "Ma'am, we'll need your statement. You kept your cool out there. That could have gone very differently." Danielle nodded. "I understand." The officer tilted her head, studying her again, that same curiosity flickering. You've done this before, haven't you? The way you handled him, the way you controlled the scene." Danielle paused, her eyes meeting the officer's. For a moment, she considered brushing it off, letting the neighborhood gossip fill in the blanks. But as she looked around, at the teenagers replaying shaky footage, at the parents still holding their kids close, at the woman in the floral blouse who had risked calling 911, it felt wrong to stay silent. "Yes," Danielle said finally, her voice steady. "I'm not just a homeowner here. I'm a tactical commander with the FBI. De-escalation is what I do, and I promise you it never gets easier." Gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. A neighbor whispered loudly, "I knew it. I told you she wasn't just some regular resident." Another said, "That explains everything." The female officer's eyes widened slightly before settling back into professionalism. "Well, that explains a lot. And thank you. You probably prevented this from turning deadly before we even got here." Danielle gave a faint smile. "That's always the goal." For a long moment, the street was quiet again. Not from fear this time, but from the weight of realization. People looked at Danielle differently now. Not just as the woman who lived on the corner with the gray SUV, but as someone who had stood face to face with a loaded gun and refused to let it define her. She finally crouched, gathering her groceries with careful hands, lifting the bags one by one. The ordinary act felt strange after what had just happened, but maybe that was the point. Life goes on, dinner still needs to be cooked, laundry still waits in the dryer, but nothing about this Saturday was ordinary anymore. As the officers drove off with the man shouting in the back seat, Danielle turned to the neighbors who still lingered. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the street. This is what happens when people let fear and prejudice control them. A gun doesn't make you right. Authority isn't a vest you put on. It's responsibility. If you want to keep a community safe, you don't do it by intimidating your neighbors. You do it by knowing them, respecting them, and treating them like human beings. Some nodded, some looked down, but all of them felt the truth of her words. Danielle carried her groceries inside, closing the door gently behind her. She leaned against it for a moment, exhaling deeply, letting the weight of the afternoon roll off her shoulders. She had faced down danger before, but somehow this one felt heavier, because it happened where she was supposed to feel safest. And maybe that's the lesson we all need to remember. Real safety doesn't come from fear or control. It comes from respect, empathy, and the courage to treat people as equals, even when pride tempts us to do otherwise. So the next time you see someone who doesn't look like they belong, stop yourself. Ask if the problem is them, or if it's the way you're choosing to see them, because that one decision might change everything. Call it a reminder, call it a challenge, but it's simple. Choose respect, not fear.